So I'm here today with Christian Klepp, who is heading up Einblick. And Einblick, for you guys who are not German speaking, is actually it's a very great name actually to have picked. It actually means insight in German. And Einblick is a Toronto-based consulting firm that works with B2B companies in technology, clean tech, fintech, and obviously with digital entrepreneurs that face complex business challenges in their target market. So they really help them with a specialized B2B approach to build up the companies, essentially. I don't want to take away too much, but I'm very pleased to have Christian here on the show who will tell us all about Einblick and obviously also, we're learning about B2B growth challenges. So Christian, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lucas. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me on the show. So,
Very good. Go in. Go right into
it. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, you've already touched on a couple of points about who we are. Yes, and Einblick, obviously, we as you mentioned, that's the German word for insight, and that's one of the benefits I would say that we would like to deliver to our clients. When they're working with us, is that we've delivered them with these valuable insights that will help them to push the needle in their or move the needle in their businesses, right? And yeah, as you mentioned, we're based in Toronto, Canada. We focus on providing branding and marketing solutions specifically for B2B. And when we say B2B, it's specifically in the tech and the B2B SaaS spaces, right? So a lot of the companies that we work with, they're dealing with complex problems that are primarily linked to all things branding, so positioning, messaging, or as we like to call it, the way they package themselves for the market, right? And as a result of that, that affects also their marketing initiatives and the way that they plan out their marketing strategy and their roadmap accordingly. So we work with them to help them overcome those problems by doing things like market research, something we call synthesis, because after you do all that research and you have all that data and those insights, you have to make sense of all of it, right? And identify those gaps, those opportunities, and then help them to develop the right brand strategy for their target audience, and then also implement some creative solutions. So just try to think of us like an outsourced B2B branding and marketing team.
Super cool. That definitely gives us a gist of what you guys are all about. Maybe you could, tell me a little bit, like, who is it that you typically be working with? Is it the entrepreneur? Is it the marketer that is working on positioning? Like, who is the champion that you sort of, are going in the ring with?
Yeah, going in the ring, that's a good one. Great question. They really, they fall into two groups, and you've mentioned them. So the first group, they're primarily like CMOs. They have different titles: CMOs, VP of marketing, marketing directors of generally mid-sized tech or B2B SaaS firms that usually have a smaller team, and they require support and strength in terms of strengthening their brand strategy and marketing initiatives. And in many situations, what happens there is their company grows, their product and solutions portfolio expands, but that isn't necessarily reflected in their branding and their marketing initiatives and their messaging, right? So sometimes, it's a little bit outdated, right? So that's where we come in to help. So that's the first group. The second group, as you also rightfully said, are these tech entrepreneurs, so CEOs and founders of B2B SaaS companies. And you can probably relate to this too, but many entrepreneurs wear what we call multiple hats, right? So they have different roles, which they all have to juggle at the same time. And marketing and branding is certainly one of those. Many other people we work with, they have limited marketing knowledge, and they don't necessarily have most of the time also the bandwidth and the time to be dealing with those things, but they are important. So what happens is, they then reach out to people like us because, they have a great product or a solution, but they're struggling with, okay, how to package that for the market and for the right target audience, right? And so that's where we come in and help them.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I mean, And myself, I've learned packaging is it's nearly a science and an art, because if you package yourself at the very beginning, you're already sort of, kind of can put yourself in a completely different bucket, and then you have a very hard challenge to get out of there. So really,
right.
really, really valuable stuff that you guys are doing. So maybe could you help me, like those marketeers that you mentioned, right? How do they, or even founders, how do they learn about Einblick? Like, what is a typical journey of somebody finding you guys and getting started, or what would be the client acquisition channels?
Interestingly enough, for the most part, believe it or not, LinkedIn. We've been quite active on that platform, and when I say active, it's really putting out content that helps to answer some of the questions that our target market has, addresses some of the challenges. So we provide some insights or some stories. And why do I say stories? We also run a podcast called B2B Marketers on a Mission. And that has provided a platform for us to invite on other fellow B2B marketers and experts across the B2B marketing spectrum to talk about challenges, recent trends that they're seeing. I think recent trends is an understatement, especially after last year, but things that have happened as a result of the pandemic. But we try to put a positive spin on it, because instead of talking about all the negative aspects of the pandemic, what has the pandemic help to change in B2B marketing from a positive perspective, and what should people be looking out for moving forward, right? And by bringing these people onto the platform, it has helped us to provide us with an archive of valuable insights, which we then turn into content, which we then put out on LinkedIn. And through that, we also help to connect and engage and communicate with other B2B marketers on that platform. And I've in the past, I would say 8 to 12 months, have built up some wonderful relationships with professionals all over the world.
Very cool. Awesome. So a little plug here. How do people can get to learn more about the podcast? Where should they go?
So I push out an episode every Wednesday, and I usually post about it on LinkedIn, and put a link, and which leads back to the website where the podcast lives. They can also find it in most of the platforms where you download your favorite podcasts, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so forth.
Very cool. What would you say? Which role does the website play? If Einblick.co, like what role does the website play in the journey of people, getting started with Einblick?
You've probably heard this 100 times already, Lucas, but I'm going to say it anyway. The website is our shop window, right? So it's the or I even call it like the display room, the showroom, right? Like that gives people a glimpse. I was going to say a blick, like a glimpse into the into our company. Not necessarily just our company, but like what we deliver at the end of the day. Because the important thing I think to remember is that you need to make it about the customer. Don't make it all about you, right? And the important thing is also to answer that question, which potential prospects will certainly have 100% of the time, is like, what makes you different, or why should I work with you, right? So it's about determining that right fit. So just to answer your question, it helps to attract that respective target audience, and hopefully also will help them to see the value that you will be able to provide to them. And then the third one is to work them through that funnel and prompt then a call to action, which is to either reach out to you or book a discovery call and so forth.
Very cool. A brief question on the website, because obviously in Pathlink's podcast, we cannot go around about asking you 2 or 3 questions about the website. What I would be curious is, where do you see the strength currently of Einblick.co? Like, you looking at the website, what do you think is a strength? Is it the ability to convert leads when they arrive? Is it, the content? Is it the experience? Where do you see strength?
I would say probably our biggest strength is because of the podcast. It's attracted a lot of attention. I mean, we've just done an analysis of the website traffic, and for the most part, the vast majority of the traffic that we get to our website is because of the podcast, which is then because of the posts that they see on LinkedIn, and that's usually where the traffic is generated. So that would probably be our strongest point at the moment.
Very cool. And I cannot go around about asking, everybody's critical about their own site, everybody who's in marketing at least. Yeah. What do you think is the room for improvement for the website?
I think, quite frankly, our website is still a work in progress. One of the things that I would like to further enhance, so to speak, is really not so much telling our story, because quite frankly, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure that that's entirely interesting or relevant. I think what I would really want to improve more is to get people, potential prospects, hopefully, or even partners, to see what the benefits are of engaging us or working with us, and why that is of value to them, and the benefits, right? Because I think sometimes it's not always immediately obvious. We get a little bit of a 50-50 feedback from the market, right? Some people say it's immediately obvious. Others say they have to go a few pages down or a few pages in, and then they see it, and then, okay, clear. We know exactly what you guys do.
Very cool. So maybe let's go into that. Like, what would you say, sort of, what is sort of a key competitive advantage that a team would be getting, or a marketeer, let's say a marketeer in a mid-sized company reaching out for some help? What is something that they're getting that is hard to get somewhere else?
I would say, because both my partner and I, we've worked in different markets across the world. So we weren't just focused on like North America alone. So I think the advantage there is that we understand the nuances of working in different markets. And I mean, it was even like that pre-pandemic, but this has been, this has become an increasingly, globalized or internationalized world, in terms of working. And obviously, online platforms and digitalization has clearly expedited that process. So I think the benefit is obviously, working with somebody that understands the dynamics of working in different markets, I think is one clear advantage. The other advantage that I'd like to say we have is that we like to, I call it, we like to use the doctor's approach to working with clients and B2B marketers. What I mean by the doctor's approach, I mean just think, for example, if you're sick, you go to a clinic, and you see a doctor. Does the doctor pitch you what medication to take and what specific brand to use before he's even diagnosed you? The answer is probably no, right? So what does the doctor first do when he meets you? He asks you, okay, so Lucas, what's wrong, right? How have you been feeling lately? Have you been sick? Oh, okay, so how long have you been feeling this way? Okay, then he'll ask about the symptoms. So he'll start probing and diagnosing and trying to determine what the issue is, right? So he will be in a role where I call it, he's an active listening participant, or sorry, active participating listener, right? So he's listening first, asking questions and listening, and then he'll talk. He'll let the other person talk first. And we like to take that role as well, right? When people come to us and say, hey, Christian, we have a problem, we need help with branding, or we need help with marketing, I'm not gonna jump right in and give them a recommendation. I'll listen to what the problem is first, right? And diagnose. And after they tell me what the issues are, then I will provide my recommendations and say, okay, listen, for your particular, because there is no one size fits all solution, right? Like each client is going to have a unique or different set of problems, right? There are certain patterns that are the same, but each client will have different challenges, and then provide them with those recommendations, and then we'll take it from there.
Yep. Very good. So I would love to sort of, got your perspective on marketing a little bit. I have a couple of quick questions about your perspective on digital growth and marketing. Are you ready for those?
Please.
Very cool. I would be curious, yeah? What's the biggest challenge in marketing for you that comes to mind when I say innovation?
You mean besides that everybody says it? That everybody says that they're innovative? I think the biggest challenge in terms of innovation, look, there's a saying, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So why have companies innovated? If you look at past trends, they've innovated because there was a problem, there was a challenge, there was something missing, or there was certain limitations or restrictions. Now, if we transplant that to our situation in the B2B marketing world, from one year to the next, like I remember even the beginning of 2019, I was still going to in-person events, and Microsoft had a huge business summit here in Toronto. There were 2,000 people there. And then suddenly 4 weeks later, in the middle of March, we went into a complete lockdown where suddenly we couldn't have meetings anymore unless we were having calls like this one, right? So for somebody like myself and our company, I mean, we're 100% online, as you are as well. So that wasn't much of a challenge. But if we're talking about other B2B industries where salespeople were going into the fields, they were attending trade shows, right? Now suddenly they couldn't do that anymore. So yes, they had to innovate. They had to find other means. They had to find other means, which, to be honest with you, they probably were not very comfortable with in the beginning, right? Especially those that were pushing back at digitizing, right? And saying, no, we don't need a new website. We don't need an online platform. That's not a very efficient use of our time because this is not the way we've been doing business. Well, guess what, my friend? 2020 changed all of that. So to answer your question about the challenge with digital marketing and innovation, I think it was a question of, it's very dependent on what industry you're in, but looking also at like what current challenges you're facing and how you're engaging with your target audience, how are they looking for you, and how you're interacting with them, and then finding the respective solution that will help both sides.
Very good. What's the biggest challenge coming to mind when I say for marketing, when I say the word return on investment?
Sorry, I laugh because that's a question that I get asked all the time. And we all know in marketing, it's not everything can be measured in terms of return on investment, right? That being said, marketing has evolved as a discipline, especially through the pandemic. And if I'm looking at if we're just going to narrow it down to B2B marketing itself, right? I think what we need to think about now as marketers is not just about things that are fancy and nice to have, and we can measure the level of brand awareness. We need to also think about these initiatives and how that will translate eventually, not necessarily into immediate sales or revenue, but eventually down the line, how that will happen, right? Because I think it's extremely important for people in a marketing function to have a share of responsibility for generating revenue.
Makes sense. What's the biggest challenge when I say, for B2B marketing, when I say conversion optimization?
When you say conversion optimization, I mean, almost immediately, the thing that comes to mind is, okay, conversion to sales, right? Conversion to sales leads. And, I was having this discussion with someone the other day. Is something like MQLs even relevant anymore, right? So the question here is, yes, B2B marketing or B2B, I would say in general, for the most part, is sales driven. And it's probably logical to think of it that way. But that being said, I think it's also important to balance, because it's certainly on the one hand, it's extremely important for a company to be able to generate revenue and increase their sales, and marketing should be responsible for part of that initiative. But on the other hand, it's also equally important at the same time to concurrently help to continue building up the brand awareness, to continue to add value in terms of generating right and targeted content throughout respective channels for members of the target audience, and that are at different stages of the journey where they will eventually convert. And by doing that through marketing, hopefully you'll be able to, I wouldn't say convert them faster, but it'll be a bit more targeted. It'll be a bit more thought out. It will lead to better and generate better results.
Very good. For the last one, I'm going to make it a little bit harder, right? If you could only could be only focusing on one in order to improve marketing, B2B marketing, what would it be? Focusing on the roadmap, focusing on new growth initiatives, looking and tweaking the messaging, or deep diving into reporting?
Probably not the first one. Probably not the last one. I would probably focus on the roadmap, and I'll tell you why. I think yes, absolutely, it's important to execution is extremely important, and the results that you generate are extremely important. but in such a complex ecosystem, which we know most B2B industries are in, I think it's extremely important to spend time on the strategy development and the planning before these B2B marketing initiatives are implemented. That being said, I think one thing which last year has taught all of us, I think, and it was a great takeaway, was that it's probably not the best idea right now to like develop those long-term plans. And why do I say that? Because things have changed so quickly. Things have changed so abruptly. As a result of the pandemic, a lot of what we've been doing previously has been disrupted. So it might be a good idea to plan in short-term sprints, monitor, measure, and iterate, and then adjust again. So it's an ongoing iterative process, right? It's not something where you do it once at the beginning of the year and then you just check in every quarter or every like a mid-year and then see how things are going. No, it's got to be you've got to be a little bit more on your feet. And I think the words agile and flexible come to mind as well, of course. So again, short-term sprints instead of marathons.
Very cool. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I would love to also learn about you personally a little bit. Like,
Sure.
What type of content do you consume? How do you educate yourself? Like, how do you choose even, where to in that in that ocean of content? What do you pick?
It's a great question. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a branding guy, so I love reading content about branding, specifically in B2B and brand storytelling. But that being said, I also, because I do run my own business and I am also responsible for business development, I think sales is equally important, wouldn't you say? So I do spend a lot of time reading posts and listening to, attending webinars or listening to podcasts that focus on B2B sales as well, right? So that's and last but not least, I'm still a little bit old school like that, but I also do like reading hardcover books.
Very cool. How do you maybe tip for the people out there looking, because there's a lot more and more webinars coming up. Like, how do you find the best webinars that fit your needs?
Different channels, really. One of them is one of them definitely is social media. Primarily LinkedIn, and sometimes it's and this is just the way the algorithm works, right? As we all know, you key in something like okay. You key in B2B sales, and then suddenly on LinkedIn or on Facebook or even on Instagram, suddenly an ad for a webinar pops up on your feed. So that's one way. That's one way that I find these relevant events that I'd like to attend or listen to. The other one is really through through this network of B2B marketers that I've built over the past couple of months, right? Because I keep in touch with them on a regular basis, and we have conversations about B2B marketing and also about our personal lives. But then they once in a while they'll say, "Hey, Christian, check it out. This is probably a webinar that's worth attending, and why don't you have a look?" All right, and then of course I reciprocate and do the same with them.
Very cool. I want to wrap it up with the last question. If today would be your very first day, right? You're starting to work on Einblick.co. What's the one advice you would give yourself?
That's a great question, and that's one I had to think about for a little bit. But I would say that the advice is linked to something a very good friend of mine here in Toronto gave me last year. And it sounds like a very ironic advice, but there is so much truth in it. So the advice was slow down to speed up. So what that basically means is not only that you have to have patience, but before you dive straight in, take a step back and analyze the situation, weigh the consequences, and then make a decision. And then when you make a decision, it will help. Hopefully it'll be the right one, and then it'll help you to speed up and become a bit more efficient. So that's probably, if I were to turn back the clock, so-called, that's the advice I would give myself.
Very cool. Christian, I really appreciate that you took a bit of your valuable time to talk with us on Pathmark Presents about how you're thinking about B2B marketing. And I want to wrap it up with, asking you if, somebody would be forgetting everything that we just discussed, what's the one thing that they should remember about Einblick?
It's certainly like what I mentioned, like, you know, at the beginning of the conversation. It's I would like them to remember the experience that they had with us. And when I say that, I mean not necessarily just when they are working with us, but even if they're just like booking a discovery call and having a conversation with us, I'd like them to like walk away feeling like they've gained, you know, they've gotten so much value out of that conversation, because again, we use that doctor approach, right? We're not pitching or selling anything. We're listening to the challenges and the issues that they're having, and we're giving our recommendations based on those circumstances, and also because of our experience in the field, and that they hopefully walk away with great insights, which is why we called our company Einblick, right?
Very cool. Christian, thanks for being part of the show today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.